If someone in your family is heading into aged care, there are 7 real official ways to protect the family home and the savings behind it. And almost nobody uses more than one or two of them because nobody ever lines all 7 up in one place before the paperwork lands on the table. Stick around, because number 7 is the one mistake that can quietly undo every other protection on this list if you skip it. None of what follows requires a lawyer's vocabulary or a six-figure accountant. Just knowing the rules exist and using them in the right order, which is exactly what almost nobody does. Let's go through all 7. Number 1, and this is the one that surprises families most. If a protected person is still living in the home, a spouse, or in some cases a close family member who's cared for the resident for years, the home isn't counted in the aged care means assessment at all. Not at a reduced value. Not temporarily. Completely excluded for as long as that person keeps living there. Picture a couple where the husband moves into full-time care and his wife stays in the home they've owned for decades. As long as she's there, that home simply never appears in his assessment. The family's biggest asset sitting completely off the table. This one applies to any family where a spouse, or in some cases a long-term carer or dependent relative, is still living in the home. It's worth checking specifically whether the person still at home actually qualifies as protected, rather than assuming it automatically applies to anyone left behind. Number 2, and this only matters if there's no protected person left in the picture. Even then, the home isn't counted at its real value. Its assessable amount is capped at just over $200,000, indexed twice a year, no matter what the home is actually worth. Take a solo retiree whose home is worth $1.2 million with nobody else living there. You'd assume the full $1.2 million counts. It doesn't. Only the capped amount does. The other $1 million of value simply isn't part of the calculation. This protection matters most for families who feel like a valuable home automatically means a much bigger bill. It's exactly the assumption that pushes people towards selling faster than they need to, when the actual assessed figure is a fraction of what the market value suggests. Number 3. Nobody is required to sell the home to pay for care in the first place. Accommodation costs can be paid as a lump sum, called a RAD, or as an ongoing daily payment called a DAP instead. Families can fund that daily payment by renting the home out rather than selling it, say $500 a week covering the cost, keeping the home in the family the whole time, to be sold later on their own terms, or not at all. This one suits families who aren't ready to let go of the home yet, emotionally or financially. It's not the cheapest option in every case, since rent has its own costs and hassles, but it buys time and keeps the asset in the family's hands rather than someone else's. It's worth genuinely comparing both options with real numbers before assuming one is obviously better. For some families, the lump sum works out cheaper over time, and for others, the rent and DAP path is clearly worth the extra admin, but that only becomes clear once you actually run both scenarios side by side, rather than defaulting to whichever one sounds simpler. Number 4, and this one takes a bit more attention. Gifting before someone enters care follows a similar 5-year rule to the one that applies to the age pension. Give away more than $10,000 in a year, or $30,000 over 5 years, and the excess can still count against the means assessment for 5 years, even though the money is long gone. A family that gifts $80,000 to help a grandchild right before a parent enters care can find $60,000 of it still being counted against them years later. The generosity was real, but the timing turned it into an ongoing cost. The fix isn't to stop being generous. It's to spread the same gift over several years within the limits, well before care becomes a live conversation, so the family gets to help without accidentally inflating what the means assessment sees. This one matters most for families who help their kids financially as a matter of course, well before anyone's thinking about aged care. The earlier a gift happens relative to when care becomes necessary, the more likely it's already clear of the 5-year window by the time it matters. Now, something simpler, because that last one was dense. Number 5. Losing part or all of the age pension once someone enters care doesn't automatically mean losing every card that comes with it. The Commonwealth Seniors Health Card and the Pensioner Concession Card are assessed separately from the pension payment itself. So a lot of families wrongly assume it's all or nothing and never bother checking whether concessions are still available after the reassessment. They usually are, it's just never checked. Picture a retiree whose age pension drops to a small part payment once their aged care means assessment kicks in. The family assumes the concession card disappears along with most of the pension, so they quietly stop using it. In a lot of cases, the card is still valid, still cutting the cost of prescriptions and out-of-pocket medical expenses, money left on the table purely because nobody checked after the numbers changed. Given how often a means assessment coincides with exactly the stretch of life where medical costs are rising, confirming concession eligibility again after the reassessment is a 5-minute check that a lot of families simply never think to make. Number 6. Back to something with more moving parts. If a home is being sold around the time someone enters care, the downsizer contribution can move up to $300,000 of the proceeds into superannuation, concessionally taxed, rather than leaving it exposed in a bank account where it's assessed at full value straight away. Timed properly, alongside the protections we've already covered, this can meaningfully soften how much of the sale proceeds actually count. Take a couple selling a home worth $700,000 around the time one of them enters care. Moving $300,000 of that into super as a downsizer contribution, rather than letting it sit in a bank account, means that portion is taxed concessionally and isn't sitting fully exposed the moment the means assessment looks at their finances. The same sale, structured with one extra step, landing in a meaningfully better position. This one is specifically for families selling a home around the time care starts. If the home isn't being sold at all, this particular lever simply doesn't apply, which is exactly why lining all 7 of these up against your own situation matters more than trying to use every single one regardless of fit. And here's number 7, the one I told you to wait for, because it's the one that ties every single other item on this list together. All 6 of these protections only work if they're set up correctly and in the right order before any money moves or any agreement is signed. Get the timing wrong on the gifting rule, or choose the RAD when the DAP would have suited the family better, or miss that a protected person's presence needed to be declared properly, and you can accidentally forfeit a protection that was sitting there for free. Picture a family that read about the protected person exemption, the capped home value, and the downsizer contribution, felt confident and structured everything themselves in a rush the week before their father moved into care. They got the RAD versus DAP decision backwards for their situation, and by the time anyone caught it, the more expensive option had already been locked in for months. Every individual fact they'd learned was correct, the order and the execution weren't checked, and that's what cost them. This last one applies to every single family on this list, regardless of which of the other 6 actually fit their situation. It's the one item that isn't optional depending on circumstances, because getting professional eyes on the combination before anything is signed is what turns 6 separate facts into a plan that actually works together. That's why getting a proper assessment, through a registered aged care financial advisor or a free aged care specialist officer appointment through Services Australia, before anything is signed, isn't just one more item on the list. It's the item that makes sure the other 6 actually apply to your family, instead of existing on paper while nobody uses them correctly. So there's the full picture. None of these are loopholes or grey areas. They're official, published protections, sitting there for any family that takes the time to line them up. The honest reason most families only use 1 or 2 of them isn't that the others are hidden. It's that nobody walks through all 7 together in the right order before the decisions get made. And the cost of that gap isn't abstract. It's the difference between a family home that stays in the family and one that gets sold faster than it needed to, or a pension and concession cards that quietly lapse simply because nobody checked whether they were still available. The rules were always there. What's missing is usually just the order they get used in. 2 honest notes before you go. First, the protected person rules, the capped home value, the gifting thresholds and the contribution limits are all reviewed and indexed regularly, so confirm the current figures with the Department of Health, Disability and Ageing or Services Australia before relying on them. Second, this is general information, not personal advice. Which of these protections actually apply, and in what order, depends entirely on your family's specific situation. So this is exactly the kind of decision to take to a registered aged care financial advisor or a free aged care specialist officer appointment before any agreement is signed. If any of these 7 surprised you, tell me in the comments which one. It helps me know what to cover next. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.